Hi folks, in this video, you're going to see an edited version for a webinar I did for QuickBooks Power users, where I'm showing them how to use the new custom report builder for QuickBooks Online Advanced. Now, this feature only works in QuickBooks Online Advanced, which is a $180 version of QuickBooks Online. And this feature by itself might make it worth it to upgrade to that version. Now, if you're not sure what version of QuickBooks you have, click on the gear menu on the top right. Then you're going to click on Account and Settings. And then you're going to click on Billing and Subscription. And then once you click on Billing and Subscription, it will tell you here whether you have QuickBooks Simple Start, Essentials Plus, or Advanced. It needs to say Advanced for this to work. Now, if after watching this video, you're blown away and you're like, yeah, I need that feature, and you upgrade to Advanced, you can upgrade from within the screen, no problem. However, I will put my email in the top somewhere. If you're going to upgrade, email me first, because sometimes I get better deals on the upgrade, a discount, some special deal on the upgrade. And just give me a quick email. It might take me a day or so to answer. But if you're upgrading to the most expensive version of QuickBooks Online, if there's a deal out there, that might be worth taking a look at it. Anyway, let's get right to it, and I hope you like it. All right. So how do you get to advanced reports, to custom report builders? As we mentioned earlier, you need to be in QuickBooks Online Advanced. So how do you know which version of QuickBooks Online you're in? You click on the gear menu, you click on Account and Settings, and then on the Billing tab, it will say what version you're in. You might be on Simple Start, Essentials, Plus, or Advanced. It needs to say Advanced for this to work. If it doesn't say Advanced, that is not going to be there. Then we're going to click on the Reports menu on the left-hand side. We're going to click on Reports one more time. And you're going to see two things that are not available in the lesser versions of QuickBooks Online. You're going to see Smart Reporting, which is the Fathom app, which is a partnership that QuickBooks Intuit has with Fathom. They've had it for several years. That gives you the ability to see pretty, beautiful KPI type of reports. But Fathom doesn't give you access to any details. No transaction details are in Fathom. So the answer to not having a detail-driven reporting system is the Custom Report Builder. When you see this area on Custom Report Builder, you're going to see three buttons. You're going to see Create a New Report from Scratch. That means that it won't give you any filters or fields right off the bat. You have to build it from zero. I'll show you how to do that. And then you have a template. This is basically a template to do an invoice report and then an expense report. As they add more capabilities and more templates, you will see more buttons there. But regardless of what buttons they add in there, you can always build it from scratch, clicking on Create New Report. Let's start with an invoice report, with a sales report. I'm going to click on Invoice Report, and then that's going to open up the template or the predetermined template that contains a list of invoices. So right off the bat, the first thing you're going to see, top left, is the ability to rename the report, right? So I can do, call it this year's sales by item, okay? Something like that. And we're going to start building a report for this year's sales by item. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu where the dates are, and you're going to notice that there's no option for custom date range. That drives me freaking bonkers, okay, that Intuit didn't put that first, okay? But they told me, Hector, that's the top priority, is to add custom dates. So you're going to see that pretty soon. Hopefully, if you're watching the recording of this is completely obsolete, and there is a custom report date range field in there. For now, I'm going to select this fiscal year, so we get all the transactions.
Something else to be bonkers about.
Right. Oh yeah. We'll bump up the bunker list to something else. All right. So now we got this fiscal year. What I'm seeing here is invoices. Now the big question is, am I seeing the details of invoices? Am I seeing the summary of the invoice? And this is a really important piece, because when you're building reports in QuickBooks, you have to be able to know whether or not you're inquiring about what's called a source line of the transaction, or the details, or the split line of the transactions. I am currently looking at the source. And the way I know this is because of the fields that I elected to show. So right now on the left-hand side, you see the Customize Report drawer. You just click on the big Customize button. The drawer opens up. That shows you the fields that it's going to display. One of the most obvious ways to kind of show the difference between the source and the split is, for example, on invoice, you're going to see two categories. You're going to see invoice by itself. You're going to see invoice line items. So information that resides on the source of the transaction, the one that encompasses the entire transaction, that's going to be under the invoice group, not on the invoice line items. So for example, things like the invoice date and the invoice number and the due date and the invoice amount, not the line item amount, that's going to be in the group of invoices only. I'm going to go ahead and turn off due date. I'm going to turn off amount, and I'm going to click on show all columns because there's 5 fields enabled here. That number 5 means how many fields in this group are being enabled. I'm going to click on show all columns so we can open that up and see what else is being shown. Customer name. I'm going to go ahead and close open balance for now. Okay, I don't want open balance, and I'm going to get rid of shipping date. So right now, I'm only showing 3 columns. I'm showing invoice date, invoice number, and customer name. Notice that there's no amount, so naturally that's all I see. I see those 3 columns in there. Now I'm going to collapse the left navigation bar so we get a little bit more of real estate, and we're going to continue to build more things on this report. Let's say that what I want to see now is I want to see products or line items. So I'm going to click on the customize button. I'm going to go ahead and collapse the invoice group and open up the invoice line item group, and then go into the details of the specific invoices. I'm going to click here where it says show all columns, and then I'm going to show product and service. So I'm going to go ahead and click on product and service. That's going to enable the product and service. That's now showing as the 4th column in the order. As you can see, that's a product or service. I can also expand this and look for ledger amount, my favorite line. As a matter of fact, I don't care about amount line anymore. I only care about ledger because in my world, I need to know whether it's a debit or a credit. And this matters a lot, especially when we're dealing with things like inventory. Okay. And we'll discuss that in a second. The other thing I'm going to add account line and split account. And these 2 things were added. They're new and they're worth it because you need to know and understand whether or not we're looking at the source or the target, the source or the detail, the source or the split. There's different names for this. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that. And now we're going to see that we have account line and split account. So at any point in time that you're looking at invoices, for example, and the account that's being shown is accounts receivable, that is going to be your source because that's the other side of the invoice equation. We have all the sales coming from other items, and then the other side, the balancing transaction, will be accounts receivable. So if I don't want to see the source, I just want to see the detail, all I need to do is I need to filter out that account type. So we're going to click on customize, and we're going to go down. We're going to collapse invoice line items, and we're going to go down to chart of accounts, and we're going to enable account type. By doing that, now I'm going to be able to see my account line, my split account, and then my account type. So all I have to do at this point is to show everything but accounts receivable. So I'm going to go ahead and click on filter. I'm going to click on the drop-down menu and say I want to filter my account type, and I want to see everything but accounts receivable. Okay, that's one approach. I think that having the ability to choose a specific set of accounts. So for example, if I click equal and then I select, look, only show me income and COGS because I want to see maybe profit from a inventory line or something like that. That's an option. You can do that. But if your invoices contain something that's hitting other income, other expense, or regular expense category, or maybe even hitting a prepaid liability or something like that, that is going to come into play when you start thinking about how to build this report. So you have those 2 options. You can just go manually select income and cost of goods sold, or come in there and click on does not equal and say everything but accounts receivable. But just keep in mind that if you do everything but accounts receivable, if there are things in your invoices hitting other accounts that's not income or COGS, it could kind of throw you off. That is possible. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. So now I'm only seeing the sales side and the cost of goods sold side. Remember, because it's ledger amount, negative means credit, which means sale, and then a positive is debit, which means cost. All of these products you see here, masonry, floor flaming, These are all service items. Now, let's go ahead and do customize here, and let's also group it by item type or product type. So I'm going to click on product and service, and then I'm going to go to product and service type, and I'm going to click on that one. So I'm going to enable that as a field. But what I'm also going to do is now I'm going to start grouping it by that. So I have the account line, which is what I care about, the ledger amount, but now I want to group them by type of product. So I'm going to click on group here, and then I'm going to group it by, in this case, product service type, and then click on add. And what that is going to do, actually not add, add would be for a subgroup, we'll get there in a second. Let's just do it like this, and then we close out of that grouping. And then what you're going to see now is now the data is organized and grouped by type of product. So we have all of our service items that were sold via invoices, and then we have all the inventory items that were sold via invoices. I'm going to go ahead and open up the inventory, and now we get to see all the sales at the line item level for all my inventory. Now, what I can also do is I can do a subgroup. So I got product and service type, then I can click on add and create a subgroup. And then with a subgroup, maybe I'll pick the actual product name. So now by doing that, when I go and open up my inventory, now it's split off by the name of the product. So I have all my inventory sales, and I have them grouped by the 2x4s and the 2x6s. So, all right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to do like subtotals. I want to do totals. So I'm going to click on Edit Group Calculations. I'm going to select the column, and I want to say, look, I want you to total the ledger amount. So what's really cool is you get totals, you get averages, you got percentages. Okay. So for now, let's just do total so we kind of understand what's going on here. And I'm going to also change the order of these. I'm going to click on layout, and I'm going to bring the ledger amount just kind of a little bit closer, just because I want it more towards the left-hand side and have more visibility towards it. Now, these are negative numbers. So bookkeeping, accounting 101, that is your profit. Okay. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Okay. That is your profit. Okay. Why? Because when I open up any of the transactions, if we look at the invoice number, notice that there's basically three lines of data. We're going to have our sales amount, which is 3,330. Then we have our cost of goods sold, which is 2,610. And then we have our inventory asset adjustment, which is 2,610. Right now, unfortunately, I'm showing the inventory asset transaction, which I don't need. So I need to get rid of that inventory asset transaction ASAP. And the way we do that is we go back to our filters and fix our filters. So I'm going to click on filter here. And instead of doing not equals to accounts receivable, and that was one of the examples I was saying, these are some of the things that you run into where you have to go back and tweak the filters. I prefer to just go straight to equals and only show me my income and my cost of goods sold lines. And the reason I want that is because I want to see profit. So now when I notice that I have invoice 101053, I'm going to see my sales amount, which is 3,330, and then my COGS account, which is 2,610. Not sure if this is being accurate. Well, let's go ahead and do traditional methods of verifying. So let me go ahead and open up a different tab here. I'm going to click on my trusty magnifying glass and search for that invoice number. I'm going to pull up the actual invoice number. Okay. I'm going to pull up the actual invoice number, and I'm going to verify the data that I'm looking at. So there's my sale amount, 3,330. Okay. I don't see my COGS. It's not visible in the invoice. But if I click on more and then click on transaction journal, that's when we get to see the guts of the transaction. Most of you are probably used to this, but for those that know about transaction journal for the first time, you're welcome. I just changed your entire worldview, right? So I'm going to click on customize here. I'm going to click on filter, and I'm kind of going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do like all income and COGS, and I can do that. You can do that. You don't have to, but if you want to go in there, actually, I guess you don't have the ability in the journal. But if you had the ability, you would filter and do income and COGS. For some reason, it's not available here. Then you can just get rid of the things that you don't need to see. That way, you only see sales and COGS. But I'm telling you, imagine there's only two lines here, the 3,330 on the income side as a credit, and then the 2,610 as the cost of goods sold. So it's very, very clear that by looking at the invoice, I can do the journal, I can see what it looks like, and I'm sort of verifying that that's the same thing that I'm looking at a custom report builder. Now, why did I have to open a second tab and find the invoice and open it up? Because for some crazy reason, the developers of the custom report builder didn't think that the most important thing about a report is for you to be able to click on it so you can inspect the transaction. That is not available yet. That is a thing that should be, but it's not there. And trust me, they know. I yelled at probably 6 people about this already. So this is a very, very important thing. We need to be able to click and drill down so we can verify what the heck we're looking at, especially in the sort of beta stages as we're getting, falling in love with the tool. We need to be able to, just for the peace of mind, click on it to see, am I looking at the right thing? So for the time being, you have to open a second tab and look at the transaction separately for you to verify what it is. But that gives you, a long story short, it does a quick profitability report on my 2 inventory items that I sell. And it is profitability because I'm showing both accounts. If I don't want to see profitability, if I only want to see sales, well, there's 2 ways to do this. One of the things we can do is we can go to filter and then change this to only income. And then just by removing COGS from here, now we get sales. So what we're seeing here is sales. Before we were looking at profit. So simply by just adding the COGS category in there, we transform from looking at sales to only looking at COGS. That's an option. The other option that I could suggest is we can go to group and then we can add one subgroup and then do account type. It's going to be pretty interesting here. So now we expand inventory, we expand the product, and now we have the sales and the COGS as 2 separate lines. Okay? So you can inspect COGS and sales as 2 separate lines. Now, one other thing that drives me bonkers, and it will be the next thing that drives me bonkers after they fix the custom report builder, is I cannot group by invoice number. For some crazy reason, I don't know why or how, the programmers thought, yeah, we don't need that. We don't need to group by invoice number. And the problem with that is, if I want to know my profit per invoice, I currently cannot do that with this custom report builder. And that drives me crazy, okay? So one of the things that we do need is we need to be able to group by invoice number. That's not available. I don't know what the technical reasons are behind it. To me, it's something that was like I missed from the checklist and no one looked into it until someone like me points it out. They really weren't going to fix it proactively. So again, all these criticisms that I'm giving here, I'm not trying to stand off to Intuit or whatever. What I'm trying to drive you to do is to click on give feedback and type here, we need to group. We'll do it right now. We need to be able to group.
Because this feedback is actually fixed tomorrow.
Right. And one thing is worth adding. You could take a screenshot. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, you don't have to like go out there and do a screenshot. You can take a screenshot and say, hey, I need to be able to group by invoice number. Give your feedback. Click next. That's going to be really, really important. Okay. So you'll give that feedback. Someone does read it, right? Because I literally I put my cell phone there once and say, if you don't understand this, call me. Somebody literally called me. Okay. So they do read it. I'm not saying they're going to call you, but I say they do read it. Do it. It's extremely, extremely important that happens. Okay. I think I did a pretty good job showing kind of how the invoice process works. We'll go back and do maybe more examples to that. As a matter of fact, let me save this. Okay. So I'm going to save it as a custom report. That way I can go back to it. So that's a really cool thing. You can save it and just kind of go back to it. So let's create a new one. I'm going to go back to custom report builder. I'm going to click on create new report. And Michelle's question is, could we build sort of a report of inventory history? So one of the things that the answer might be no. It's because I don't have all dates as an option here. So the problem by not having all dates is that I cannot bring any carryover historical inventory balances. So because of that, we're kind of screwed. But I can show you how that would kind of work. I'm going to do this here, which gives me sort of the most amount of information. And then the first thing I would do is I would definitely go to chart of accounts here. and I would enable account, not account type, but account name. And then I would filter and only show, because inventory is always going to be on the inventory asset account. So I'm going to start with inventory asset as my main filter. That way, the only thing I'm looking at is inventory asset type of transactions. The next thing I would probably need to do, and it's to show the transactions. Let's do transaction line, and let's bring product and service in the transaction lines. That way I can see all of the products and services that have been affected by inventory asset, which is essentially how inventory gets tracked. Next thing I would do is bring quantity, most likely. And then here's where we see all the positives and negatives in here. I would probably group these by product, definitely group these by product. That way I can now see sort of the history of the movement of the product. I would also possibly bring transaction type into the mix. I think transaction type would be useful. So let's open up here transaction and let's do transaction type. And let's bring transaction type, change the order of it. And let's bring transaction type maybe next to a product and service. And then let's expand these. And now we can see, okay, we got a inventory starting value, we have an invoice, we have a bill, and then we have the positives and negatives. Now, so we're missing a couple things. One of the things that we're missing is, as I mentioned earlier, is the ability to do all dates so we can see the entire history or to get some sort of carryover balance. Because of that we can't achieve what Michelle's asking for. But I'm showing you the baseline on how you start getting there, and then you can go back and push and say, hey, I'm missing this one thing to be able to produce the report that I want. So the next thing here would be to do a subtotal. So we're going to subtotal by quantity. Okay, subtotal by quantity. That way we can kind of get a balance. So according to this, I have 714 units available. Again, that's based on the history of inventory from the beginning of the year, not to all dates. That might be accurate because I don't think I did inventory in this particular file prior to that, but we can go back and verify that in a second. So these are supposed to be my quantities. Let's just go to the different tab here, and let's just for the heck of it, see if what my regular reports tell me about my inventory valuation summary. Okay, so this is accurate. See, 714, 765. So that's accurate. So what I'm essentially seeing here is that. Now, what I would probably need to see is some sort of running balance of these inventory by week or by date, so I could possibly identify at what point I went negative. Unfortunately, I can bring transaction date into here, so I can bring transaction and then bring in transaction. So yes, I can bring transaction date into the fold, and I'm gonna change the order and maybe move that maybe to the front here. So when we're looking at the history here, we're looking at transaction date. Unfortunately, what I cannot do is I currently cannot group by week or month, or like I can do by date, okay? But the problem is that by date is by specific date. So I can check what the stock was that day, right? But it's not a running balance, it's just total movement. So I would need to have two things. I would need to have the ability to have a field for running balance, okay, or be able to go back to the beginning of time and do that. And on top of that, be able to group these not by day, but by week, by month, or something like that. So because of that, Michelle, that report that you're specifically asking for cannot be achieved. The tools are not there yet. Okay, all right. So we're gonna go back to Custom Report Builder. We're gonna go to Reports, and now we're gonna do an expense transaction. Okay, I'm gonna click on expense. So we started with the expense report template, and again, let's go from scratch to understand what we're looking at. Let me go ahead and do this fiscal year, and I'm gonna collapse the left navigation bar so we get a little bit more real estate. So let's click on the Customize button, and let's take a look at what are we looking at. So we're looking from the expense grouping. We're looking at 7 fields. We're looking at due date, transaction number. We're looking at transaction date, transaction type, and amount. So let's go ahead and get rid of due date. Let's leave transaction number. That's important. Let's leave transaction date, transaction type, and amount. I'm okay with that. Vendor name is important. Let's get rid of open balance for now. And let's bring in locations, okay? And yeah, let's bring in locations, right? And so now we have all these fields that we're working on. We have those fields in there. Now I want to change the order. So I'm going to go back to layout, and I'm going to group it first by transaction type. Then I'm going to group it by, actually, I'm going to do vendor first, then transaction type, then transaction number, then the date, then the amount, then the location. Let's try with that. And now let's start doing some grouping. So let me group this by vendor name first. Okay, and then we will do the second grouping, transaction type. That would be useful. Okay, so we'll close that. So now we're looking at all the expense type of transactions. That one next to it is how many lines are under each of these rows. So we look at one that has 2, for example, Crystal Bay windows. I'm gonna go ahead and expand that, and then we can see that we have a bill and then we have check. If I expand bill, I see my bill here. I should probably move dollar amount closer to the left here so we can see it a little bit earlier. Let's do it after transaction type here, right? Okay, there we go. So now we have our bill, our $1,200 bill on 4/20. And then if I expand check, I see my 3 checks towards that vendor. You want to see the expense category? Sure, let's go to customize here. And let's go into possibly split. We need split line. So let's go back into expense and let's look for, could either be account or split. Let's open both and see which is the one that we want. So we open account and we open split. And now let's open one of these. We got a bill, okay? And our split contains accounts payable. We don't need that. We knew a bill was accounts payable. So all we need is just account. So by opening both account and split, to me, is the best way to know, okay, which is the one that I'm looking at. So let me click on customize and let me get rid of split and just show account. And then maybe even move account a little bit higher up. And let's put it here next to transaction type and collapse that. And then let's expand one of these vendors. We got 24 bills under Western Telephone. We can expand that. Now we can see all the bills and we can even see all the categories that these bills are hitting. Pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Okay. Now let's go ahead and do one interesting thing that could be useful. I'm going to click on group, and instead of grouping by transaction type, I'm going to group it by account. Okay. Now what kind of information that would give me? Well, I can see whether any particular vendor is using more than one account as their category, and that could be an indication of potentially misclassification. Not always the case, but because sometimes a vendor could serve in multiple capacities. But if you want to see, in your entire database, is there a vendor in which we're using and not categorizing in a consistent fashion, you can see any of these that have 2s next to it, like First National Bank. Notice that they have 2 categories: bank service charges and loan interest. That makes sense. Maybe there's not that much more to look at here. But then we have the same, I think, we have right here, Big Value Warehouse Store. I'm going to open that and notice that the same vendor is being used for 3 different categories. And you can see how many transactions of each category, and you can expand and you can look at each one of them. You can look at the amounts. You can look at the transaction number, whatever other piece of information we bring in there. Okay. So it's an example of like one way you can use an expense transaction. Another thing we can do is we can bring locations and classes into the mix. That's where the reporting becomes really powerful. So I'm going to click on customize, go back into columns, go back to my expense group, and then I'm going to enable location, okay, and class as well. Then what I'll do is I'm also going to group these by location first, and then I'll do account second. Just an example. Okay. So we have all these vendors here. When I expand one vendor, Miller Properties, notice that I have my Palm Beach location and my Miami location. If I expand that, I can see that in my Miami location, I use Miller Properties for rent. I expand that, you get to see all the transactions.
As you're expanding these, is there a global expand contract? Is it all? There
isn't. That is part of my wish list that I gave to Intuit. expand all, collapse all. That would be kind of cool.
It's on the bonkers list.
That's right. It's a you know what? The global expand and global expands doesn't drive me as much bunkers as not having a custom date range, as not having tags, as not having drop down custom fields, as not having the ability to group by invoice. I mean, I have other things in my priority on my bunker list, but
It's a lower priority bunker.
it's a low bunker. Correct. Yeah, exactly. All right. So let's experiment with maybe shifting some of the hierarchy of these groups. Let me clear them all and let me start with location. So we start with location. Okay. Then maybe we can do class second. That's pretty awesome, right? So I can open my Palm Beach location and then I have transactions by class. And then maybe in the class, let's go crazy with a third grouping. And that's a limitation. There's only three groupings, but I mean, I would have been happy with just one, but I mean with two, but 3 layers is awesome. I love that. I mean, would it be nice to have 4? Yeah. I mean, but 3 is pretty good. Okay. So we start with the location, then we open it by class. Then you can see it by category. So you can start seeing how you can do some really, really interesting type of reporting here. Now, what if the custom report builder doesn't give you what you need? Okay. Well, then you export to Excel. So I'm going to click on export here and then click on export to Excel. Okay. And then I should have a report here in Excel. Let's open that up. And then you will notice, one thing you will notice is that in the custom report builder, we have a grouping and a hierarchy. Currently, when you export to Excel, the only thing that you will see is all the data, but in a flat view. Kudos to the Excel export for a couple of things. One, I like the last update. In my opinion, that should not go on the top. That should go on the bottom. That way I don't have to delete a row to make a pivot table, right? Or if you're gonna put it, maybe put it here to the side, like this. Again, that way I'm not bothered with having to delete the top line because you know that if I export to Excel, this thing is gonna go in a pivot table, right? For sure. So like, why make me extra work to delete that line in there? Okay. All right. So I'm going to take and grab all these columns here and do a pivot table. And then I can, maybe do things that the pivot table can't, like maybe group by transaction number, something like that. And then I go by vendor name or let's move vendor name to the top. And then we go amount. Okay. Whatever it is. So I can start doing things that maybe custom report builder can't do. I don't want to spend my time doing stuff in Excel. That's an entirely different rabbit hole. But no matter how good your accounting software is, your reporting software is, there's always going to be the need to do something in Excel because people want to change the formatting, want to delete something. So having that Excel export capability is extremely important. Again, if it was my choice, make it flat, 100% flat off the bat so I can go straight to pivot. But it would be nice if somehow they can figure out, and I'm sure that's more complex, how to pre-group these in Excel. So when you export it, it's already pre-grouped. It's complicated because there's licensing with Excel and Excel tools, and possibly they'll never get to something like that. But one thing that you will notice, if you haven't already, and that this is high in my bunker list, I can't print this. It's freaking unbelievable to me that someone would develop a reporting tool and not think of the print capability like first. Okay, you cannot print this. Like I could try to print the screen. I can do Control P on the keyboard, and then I'm gonna see like this bunch of nonsense in here. Okay, so I can't truly print this. I mean, I would have to like maybe get like super creative and scale these down to like 20% maybe of the screen. And like just do something like it's just there's I mean
the magnifying glass.
right there's no, they have not thought about how to convert this into a PDF. And when I sat down with the product manager, I realized it is a big undertaking. Believe it or not, it is not that simple. So the only way to truly print this is to export to Excel and print from Excel. So the only unfortunate thing is because you don't get the pre-grouping in Excel, you don't get to print it exactly as you see it. Okay, so this is for now This is a data exploration tool with no drill down capacity, with no printing capacity, but yes, Excel capacity, and yes, pivot in Excel type of thing. Let me do a summary of the things that it doesn't have. That way, you do provide the feedback if any of these are important to you. So no drill down when you click on a transaction, no grouping by invoice number, no print or PDF workflow. Excel doesn't match the collapse and expand nature, and no custom summary report. That I'm just thinking about the QuickBooks Desktop, where you can build it as not a detailed transaction, but as a kind of rows and columns type of transaction. That's an entirely different system in play. I mean, you can use the same engine, I guess, but it's a different workflow altogether. So out of the first four, drill down, grouping by invoice number, print workflow, and Excel export with collapse, which one do you think? Put it in the comments. I just would love to know which of these feel to you that should be the top priority. Again, I'm not even sure if they'll read this, but I'm just wondering from the crowd here, based on my comments, is it drill down? Is it invoice number grouping? Is it PDF printing? Is it export Excel with a collapse capability? Okay, so I forgot to add this, and I should have added this. Drop-down custom fields is still not functioning, okay? They told me they were working on that. It should be working today, yesterday, last week. It's not there. Drop-down custom fields really important, to start adding, especially because that's the advantage of QBO Advanced, right? You got custom fields. So it makes no sense to have to pay the extra for QBO Advanced if then I can't report on those custom fields. Now, to be fair, the regular reporting system works great with custom fields, but they haven't added it here yet. The non-drop-down custom fields, the old school, just fill in data, like in a free form type, those are showing, but the drop-down ones are not showing. So I also mentioned custom date filtering. That's not there. Tags are not available. I don't get it. The tags should be available. If you add tags, you need a report for it. One thing I want to point out, and I made peace with this. That's why I'm not going to put it in my bunkers category. This is not a real-time reporting system. QuickBooks is pushing your data to, let's call it, a separate database for this. Okay? So it's an entirely different database that is being synced every couple of hours. So when you pull a report, you have to look at the bottom that says updated 3 hours ago, 4 hours ago. So you will not be able to change a transaction and then see what it looks like in the system. And that, again, for someone that's testing this, for someone like me that's testing and discovering and trying to understand, that's a big problem. But in the real world, this is not. Most people, when they pull reports, they pull last week, last month, last year. They're not pulling everything up to the last couple of hours. So in the real world, this is not a real problem that is 3 hours old or whatever. But for someone that's testing and trying, that was a really, really big issue for me. And there's no push button where you can force an update. I'm not sure if they ever will, but something to point out. The other thing is, good point. Yeah, good point too. So you technically, if you're gonna have a last updated there, you need to know the time that it was last updated, because that will be relevant. Other thing, and this might be minor, but to me it's important for construction companies. I want to see a field for the customer name and a field for the project as two separate fields. That way, when I pivot them, I can pivot them cleanly, right? So I can group it by customer and then group it and then sort it by project. Right now, there is a customer project field that shows you the entire path. So customer, sub-customer, or customer project. But I would like to see a separate customer and a separate project. I also want to see that in the expense category. So I want to know expenses by customer, overall customer, billing customer, and expenses by project as two different points of analysis that's currently not available. Okay. So I like to see those things separated. There's no debit and credit column. Again, ledger amount sort of solves the problem, but it would be cool to have debit and credit, because I could filter them and say, only show me debits, only show me credits. And having debits and credits, it's sort of a starting point to building a custom trial balance report, which could also bring forth a whole bunch of interesting things. The other thing that I think it should have, I think there should be a profit amount. I think that if you got inventory sales, and QuickBooks knows the profit at the invoice level or the profit at the line item level, it would be nice to have profit on inventory items, so I don't have to see the income side and the COGS side and do all those workarounds that I show you separately. I would like to see those. So Intuit has received that feedback from me. That's one guy giving feedback. If I can get a whole army of you, like pointing in the feedback, maybe the top 2 or the top 3 of these that you think you need, plus whatever else you need, put that in the feedback. Somebody's reading it. Trust me, somebody's reading it. I 100% tell you somebody's reading it.